I took the train to the reunion today since we planned to drink. There, I ran into a guy who used to tease me a lot, whom we'll call Brandon. Man, you don't even have a car. Is that just a pipe dream for someone as poor as you? Well, even if you had one, a broke guy like you could only afford a clunker, so you couldn't show up here in one anyway. Brandon said this, bursting into loud laughter. I was really irritated by his attitude at that point. Judging someone without knowing anything about them is just not funny at all. After that, he kept following me, bragging about himself. Honestly, I was getting fed up with him. Then, a luxury limousine pulled into the venue's parking lot. It stopped in front of the entrance, and a beautiful woman got out. As soon as our eyes met, she greeted me respectfully. My name is Kevin Smith. I'm the middle child of 5 siblings. I have an older sister and brother. And I have a younger sister and brother. Mom always had a gentle smile. She never raised her voice, always responding or advising us, no matter our whims. Dad is a taxi driver. He used to work for a car maintenance company, but he had to retire due to a back injury. Dad, who loved cars and worked in that field, also had a commercial driving license. So he switched to his current job as a driver, taking advantage of that qualification. I was heavily influenced by my dad and developed a strong interest in cars. I always played with die-cast cars I got at children's events or tour cars my dad received from clients. I also learned about various types of cars by looking for car encyclopedias handed down from my brother. I would recall the knowledge and shapes I memorized and doodle them on flyers and school notebooks. My teacher, Mr. Thompson, used to scold me, saying, "Your notebook looks like a catalog. Stop doodling. It's a fond memory." My greatest joy was looking through car catalogs that Dad brought home. Thanks to his old job, he still had connections with many car dealers and would occasionally bring home catalogs of the cars they handled. Seeing the changing cover designs with each season and the new car models designed for each season always thrilled me. But my dad seemed a bit concerned about this. "Hey, Kevin, I feel bad that I can only give you catalogs. If you want comics or other toys, just let me know. I'll find a way to get them for you." "Really, I'm fine. I enjoy these a lot." "Is that so?" Our family wasn't wealthy by any standard. After all, we were a family of 7. Just the food and education expenses for a month were substantial. Clothes and school supplies were hand-me-downs from my older siblings. Even if I wanted a new toy, I could only get it on my birthday. There was a time when I really wanted a car game and begged my parents for it, but they looked troubled and said, "Sorry, we'd love to get it for you, but things are tight right now," with regret in their voices. Being at the age when my selfishness was at its peak, I became sullen for about 3 days when my request was denied. But as I grew older, I started to understand our family's situation. With that understanding, I began to grasp just a bit of the feelings my parents had when they had to refuse our whims. At that time, I acknowledged my parents' boundless kindness and gradually stopped being so demanding. The school I attended was a small one. With only 2 classes per grade, standout individuals were recognized by all students. Just like us, the Smith siblings. As a result, we were often teased. But my older siblings, being well-grounded individuals, managed to turn such negative comments into jokes or simply brushed them off skillfully. My younger brother was the biggest and strongest among us, so he countered such ridicule with his physical presence and assertiveness. Perhaps because of that, he was respected by those around us. He became what you might call the leader of the pack. And my youngest sister, being raised as the baby of the family, was the best at making requests. All 4 of us spoiled her endlessly. Because of this, she became a beloved figure among her peers, adored by everyone in her grade. Before I knew it, she had mastered the art of charm and had won over many allies. That's why no one dared to criticize us for being a family of 7 siblings. As for me, I ended up becoming the main target of teasing. I lacked strength and didn't have the courage to confront or change my surroundings. That's why the verbal arrows meant for my siblings ended up being directed at me. But in such times, my older siblings always protected me. It was a great joy for me back then. Yet, with every instance, I felt a pathetic sense of powerlessness for not being able to do anything on my own. There was a guy in my class named Brandon. He was born into a wealthy family and could get almost anything he wanted. His life was the complete opposite of mine. Brandon, knowing my love for cars, would always boast about the cars his parents owned. "You probably don't have this at your place, or you must be jealous, right?" He would say things like that, each remark hurting me. In addition, he brought high-quality toys like die-cast cars, model kits, and RC cars to school. Toys that were of a much higher quality than the cheap ones I owned, and he would boast about them to me and our classmates. He let others handle them freely, but he would never let me. Whenever I asked, he'd always say, "I don't want your poverty to rub off on me." However, it's against the rules to bring such items to school. He would show them off to everyone, avoiding the teacher's gaze. Then one day, he went too far. "Check this out," he boasted, holding up a limited edition model that even enthusiasts would envy, in front of everyone. A piece worth a considerable amount if sold on the market. He had brought such an item to school. Naturally, everyone was impressed, expressing their envy. They all handled the model, admiring it. But of course, he didn't let me touch it. After school, an incident occurred. The limited edition model was missing. Vanished without a trace. Brandon started causing a commotion in the classroom over it. "You did it, didn't you?" He was quick to suspect me, the first one he accused. Naturally, I denied it, but he wouldn't listen to a word I said. He just bombarded me with insults. Then, our teacher, Mr. Thompson, walked into the classroom. Mr. Thompson asked the calmest student, "What happened here?" After understanding the situation, Mr. Thompson came over to Brandon and me to hear both sides of the story. I was insisting on my innocence. Brandon, on the other hand, was unilaterally placing the blame on me. Mr. Thompson seemed to sense something and let out a deep sigh. Then he said, "I understand the situation, so let's all start looking for it. Something that valuable can't just disappear." And everyone remaining in the classroom began searching. For a while, nothing was found, but as the day was about to end, one of the boys came forward, looking guilty, in front of Mr. Thompson. He admitted, "I'm sorry, I hid it," and immediately went to apologize to Brandon as well. Brandon forgave him easily, as if it were a minor matter. Despite having been so harsh with me, I was filled with surprise and anger, but at that moment, I couldn't say anything. Mr. Thompson was still a young teacher, with a flexible mindset and a broad perspective, always treating us students fairly. He kindly said to me, "You got caught up in quite a mess." Those words were a strong stimulus for me, who had been continually blamed without the usual support of my older siblings. Tears streamed down my face as I told Mr. Thompson in broken words, "I was suspected because I'm poor. It can't be helped, but it becomes harder and harder when everyone looks at me like that. Not being believed was painful." Mr. Thompson gently patted my head and said softly, "It's better to speak up against unfairness. That courage will be the key to saving your heart. Besides, you're not alone. There are always people who believe in you, just like I believe in you, Kevin." Those words stayed with me deeply. Knowing there were people who believed in me, I felt reassured that I had someone to rely on, and from the next day, I was more open about expressing my thoughts. As days passed, I became more outgoing. Being honest and speaking my mind led to less teasing about being one of 7 siblings. However, Brandon's attitude remained unchanged. I continued to assert my dislikes without backing down. When he became too persistent, I made it a point to ignore him. Eventually, Brandon would walk away, clearly not amused. I learned that hiding my feelings wouldn't convey them to others. By actively speaking up, I could change from who I used to be. Feeling hopeful, I started engaging more with my classmates. Gradually, as I made various friends, Brandon's harassment stopped. 20 years have passed, and I've grown. Speaking up has become a part of who I am, enabling me to connect with many. Now, I'm engaged in a job that benefits from my network. Around that time, I got a call from my parents. There was a letter for me in the mailbox. I had my parents check it, and it was an invitation to a reunion. The main event was to celebrate the 20-year milestone and unearth a time capsule we buried in 5th grade. Initially, I thought nah, but when I heard that Mr. Thompson, who had always been kind to me, would also attend, I decided to participate immediately. However, my current workload made attending challenging. But I began to strategize, thinking I could make it work by rearranging some commitments. I now live far from my hometown, away from my family home. I thought getting to the venue would be difficult, but it was conveniently near my current residence. I can make it if I finish my work in the morning, I thought. With that last concern resolved, my plans were set. Choosing a venue for the after-party, which I had also pondered, was Zia. I promptly booked a spot online. The reunion took place in a spacious pub, reserved entirely for us. Since the invitation mentioned drinking, I opted for the train over driving. The highlight was the unveiling of the time capsule. The organizer had retrieved it from our elementary school and brought it to the reunion. We were to open it together on Signal. Upon arrival, old friends welcomed me warmly. Despite nearly 2 decades, I recognized everyone. Everyone had matured well, displaying a charm almost beyond recognition from our elementary days. I enjoyed catching up and reminiscing with them. At that moment, a notably lively group entered. In the midst of them was Brandon, eagerly talking about the luxury car he now owned. Brandon's car is stunning. I've never seen such a luxury vehicle before. Me too, me too. Typical Brandon, always so extravagant. His friends, essentially a fan club, were relentless in their adulation. Brandon himself was roaring with laughter, visibly basking in the attention. His entrance and style dominated the room, capturing everyone's gaze. Today, Brandon was decked out like a celebrity, his suit paired with ostentatious gold accessories and a watch that glittered with diamonds, unabashedly flaunting his wealth. His followers erupted in cheers, their enthusiasm unmistakable. "Really? Well, I'll take you all for a spin later," he announced, with the flamboyance of a showman. His followers erupted in cheers again, their excitement undiminished. Intrigued by the luxury car that had sparked such a buzz, I looked outside the venue. There, prominently displayed at the entrance, was a vivid red luxury sports car. Its presence was like a tomato on top of a sundae. Well, it was out of place, to say the least. Observing the car in disbelief, Brandon came over to me. And true to form, he immediately taunted me with poor. Granted, I hadn't dressed lavishly for the event. My watch was modest, and my suit was a standard charcoal gray. My shoes were the usual leather, making me resemble the typical office worker seen downtown. Hence, his jabs seemed unwarranted, leaving me bemused. "You're a car enthusiast, right? How did you arrive today, huh?" "As usual, I took the train," I answered. At this, Brandon howled with laughter. "You don't own a car. Is having one just an unattainable dream for someone as poor as you? Even if you did, a guy like you could only afford a beater, so showing up in one wouldn't be an option, right?" Brandon jeered, his laughter booming. His arrogance was infuriating. Making assumptions without knowledge is one thing, but finding them amusing is entirely another. Engaging him would only escalate the situation. So, as before, I responded ambiguously and removed myself from the conversation. However, throughout the reunion, he followed me about, constantly boasting. Eventually, even I grew weary of his relentless self-promotion. Initially annoyed, my encounter with my former teacher provided a welcome distraction, and Brandon eventually drifted away. I savored the time catching up with Mr. Thompson, discussing the past and present. This exchange lifted my mood, making me anticipate the after-party. But then, the cacophony returned. One of Brandon's entourage seemed to be begging for a ride in his car. Assuming Brandon was reveling in the limelight, I glanced his way. Regrettably, our eyes met. "Oh, are you jealous too? You should just admit it if you are. But I wouldn't let someone like you touch it anyway. Don't want my precious car catching your poverty stink." While embracing his two sidekicks standing beside him with both arms, he said. Then he added, "But hey, if you grovel and lick my shoes, maybe I'll consider it. Miss this chance, and you'll never get a ride." To be honest, comments like that made me feel more contempt than anger. I pitied him and chuckled dismissively. Just then, "Hey, check that out. What is that? I've never seen such a car in real life." People near the entrance were whispering excitedly. Curious, I went to see what the fuss was about. There stood a limousine, even more out of place than Brandon's car. "Hey Brandon, man, you're incredible. Did you arrange this car too?" One of his followers looked at him with admiration. But Brandon himself seemed confused. "No, I don't know anything about this." Brandon muttered that under his breath. Then, the people around him suddenly looked puzzled and started looking around, wondering who it could be. Just then, a beautiful woman stepped out of the limousine. Upon spotting me, she smiled and nodded in greeting. "Mr. Smith, sorry to keep you waiting. I've arranged the car for the after-party as you instructed." "Ah, thanks," I replied. Our exchange made my classmates do a double take. Then a friend from the organizing committee came over and thanked me. "Kevin, thanks for arranging this. This was passable because of my current job. I'm the president of a luxury car rental company." My friends, who've kept in touch, knew this. This time, I was asked if I could plan an impactful after-party, so I decided to offer a limousine at a discounted rate. We planned to head to the after-party venue in the limousine after the main event. To ensure enjoyment during the ride, I stocked the limousine's fridge with various drinks and snacks. That should be impactful enough. The friend organizing the event explained the situation to everyone there. From different parts of the crowd, voices could be heard saying that Kevin is a president and must be some kind of joke. Can't be real. Like the organizer, a few friends were in the know about me, but it seemed most were not. Amid all the attention, Brandon approached me. You're the president of a rental car company. That's not true, right?" "It's no lie. With my line of work, I've seen so many luxury cars, I'm practically jaded. I think they're fine for an occasional spin, but for everyday use, a regular car suits me just fine." With a relaxed smile, I grinned at Brandon. At that, he seemed to flush with frustration, his face turning beet red. Not only the car, but everyone was also captivated by the woman who had stepped out of the limousine. Noticing the many gazes on her, she addressed the classmates, saying, "I am serving as Kevin's secretary." The crowd, initially stunned, quickly gathered around her. "You're so beautiful. You must be great at your job. How long have you been Kevin's secretary? Frankly, what do you think of him? Which university did you graduate from?" Faced with a barrage of questions, the secretary seemed a bit bewildered. So, I decided to set the record straight. "Sorry to spoil the fun, but she's my sister, so back off," I said. "What? Seriously?" everyone exclaimed in surprise. "Yes, the woman serving as my secretary is indeed my sister." Known for her charm and for attracting the opposite sex throughout her school years, she's become somewhat of a legend. While she's still as willful as ever on the inside, her outward appearance is undeniably appealing. Thanks to that, when she handles client relations, she's guaranteed to be a great success. She's truly a valuable asset. By the way, Mr. Smith, about that sports car parked in front of the shop, my sister inquired. Yes, that's right, but it's not really worth mentioning, I whispered back. However, Brandon must have overheard because he shouted, "What's that? Say it clearly." So, with a sigh, I said loud enough for everyone to hear, "That car, it's a rental, right? It's one of the cars our company rents out, isn't it?" Brandon turned beet red and denied, "That's not true. I bought that car." However, the car had a sticker on the window, clearly indicating it was a rental. Anyone familiar would instantly recognize this. It seemed no one else at the venue was aware, so I had kept quiet about it. Upon realizing Brandon's car was a rental, his followers quickly changed their tune. In disbelief, they said, "So it was just borrowed. What a letdown, seriously," and walked away from him. Then, they began to prepare to leave the venue. They even began preparing to leave, getting into the after-party mood. Only my secretary, Brandon, and I were left in the now messy pub. I didn't know what to say to the disheartened Brandon. At that moment, he started to mutter various things. He was born an only child into a wealthy family, in stark contrast to me. However, his parents often sacrificed their time because of their wealth and were rarely home. He was given everything he wanted, but he always felt a sense of loneliness. In contrast, I had many siblings. My older brothers and sisters looked out for me, and I had adorable younger siblings. Brandon seemed to envy that. He too liked cars and often browsed thrift catalogs. He wanted to be friends over our shared interest in cars, but never said so because of his pride. He also wanted to apologize for the model incident from the past, but after that event, I stopped interacting with him, which made him anxious. The same went for today's luxury car. He knew it was out of place but wanted to grab the crowd's attention by driving it. I was listening seriously, but my sister wasn't. Upon hearing his confession, she immediately exclaimed, "That's creepy." I tried to calm her down, saying, "That's no way to talk about something someone said seriously," but my sister wouldn't stop. "Teasing just because you want attention, maybe that's fine for kids, but for an adult to say that, it's nothing but creepy. It's like being a stalker." Brandon was visibly shocked by her relentless words. I thought to myself, she went too far, but even as the two of us felt down, my sister continued relentlessly. "If you wanted to make up, you should have just apologized sincerely instead of all this roundabout nonsense. Acting like this for years is just childish and uncool," she said. Brandon looked like he was about to cry. But what my sister said was right. Though, I do think she might have gone a bit too far. Sorry for my sister, but she's right. There's a limit to how much you can push your pride. I'm sorry, but I can't see us becoming friends, I told him. Hearing this, Brandon collapsed to his knees, even more devastated. "I heard there's an after-party. Where's it at?" Mr. Thompson, our former teacher, suddenly appeared amidst the tense atmosphere. "You guys, arguing like this when you should be capable of mature thought. Honestly, it's a bit disappointing as your teacher," he said. "Mr. Thompson, how long have you been listening?" I couldn't help but give a wry smile. Mr. Thompson said, laughing heartily, "Well, I didn't intend to at first." Then, he suddenly became quiet and looked at Brandon with a serious expression. "Brandon, a dialogue is about respecting the other person's opinion while expressing your own. You're aware of what you've done up to this point, right? Regardless of your past, you can't erase those facts. So, the right to forgive or not lies with Kevin. Just because you apologize doesn't mean you'll be forgiven. It doesn't always work out so conveniently." Although Mr. Thompson's tone was as gentle as possible, his words were stern. He must have given the same guidance to him when he was in elementary school. Brandon began to cry suddenly, perhaps recalling that time. Next, Mr. Thompson looked at me. You've become able to express your feelings clearly. People can change, they can grow. I believe you understand that. You might feel unforgivable now, but I hope you can look at it in the long run. To me, both of you are dear former students, he said with a gentle smile. Mr. Thompson's words seemed to slowly seep into my heart. Thanks to his warm influence, I felt like I had more room in my heart. Thanks to that, I was able to think like this. Right now, I might not be able to forgive Brandon. The wounds he inflicted are deep. But if he tries to change and make efforts from now on, perhaps we could become good friends again. In the chilly, heavy, and damp atmosphere of the bar, even in such a situation, Mr. Thompson remained unflappable. Well, that's a fantastic limousine. Does it even have a refrigerator? Riding in such a car must be like a dream. By the way, how many people can it hold? It can hold up to 8 people. Well, that's amazing. While receiving various explanations from my sister, Mr. Thompson carefully observed the limousine. As I watched Mr. Thompson with amusement, Brandon spoke to me. I'm truly sorry for what I did in the past and just now. I'll never trouble you again. I won't be so presumptuous as to ask for forgiveness. But if we ever meet again, I hope you'll give us a chance to rebuild our relationship. Well, if we meet again. It's hard to suddenly engage in a friendly conversation with him. But watching someone trying to change makes you want to keep an eye on them. I couldn't help but let out a bittersweet smile, mixed with complex feelings. Just before we left the bar, a time capsule opening ceremony was held. At the organizer's cue, everyone counted down, and at the end, the seal was broken. Then, everyone took out the items with their names on them. Inside the time capsule with my name was a toy car I used to play with and a letter. Upon opening it, the letter was written in the awkward handwriting of a young boy. It began with, "To my adult self. To my adult self, are you doing well? Did you get a job related to cars? I'm currently trying to make friends with various people. I've gradually made more friends. Spending time with friends is fun. I've become able to express my feelings thanks to the words given by Mr. Thompson. Have you forgotten about this? Please make sure to say thank you. Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely do not forget." I couldn't help but laugh after reading the last part. Mr. Thompson, who saw me, slowly walked over to me. Was there something funny written? Yes, well, please look at this. I showed Mr. Thompson the letter. Then, Mr. Thompson, with a delighted smile, said, "How nostalgic, you were shy, but you had your childlike moments like this." To Mr. Thompson, I said, "Mr. Thompson, thank you for everything back then. I am who I am today because of you." Hearing this, the others also began to express their gratitude. You helped us create an opportunity to reconcile with friends. I came to love math, which I used to struggle with, and now I'm working my dream job as a surveyor. Thanks to Mr. Thompson's encouragement, I was able to pursue my dreams. My success today is all thanks to you. Thank you. Each of them expressed their gratitude to Mr. Thompson in turn. Though we were all well into adulthood, at that moment, we seemed just like we were back in elementary school. The way we eagerly and happily expressed our feelings was just like when we were kids. I'm the one who should be thankful. Thank you, thank you. Mr. Thompson, looking pleased, repeated his words many times. Tears seemed to well up in his eyes. Seeing you all grown up into fine adults makes me truly happy. I'm so glad to be able to spend time together like this. Truly, this is a teacher's greatest reward. Mr. Thompson's words moved many of his former students to tears. Amidst this emotional atmosphere, applause broke out from somewhere, filling the bar. The reunion, 20 years in the making, ended with a booming applause. A lot of time has passed since the reunion ended. If there's one thing that has changed in my daily life since that day, it's that there's an additional photo in my room. In it, Brandon and I are both smiling. We're standing in front of cars we each bought with our own money, arms around each other's shoulders. Becoming friends with him, despite our past grievances, was also thanks to Mr. Thompson. Every morning when I see this photo, I'm reminded that people can change. And at the same time, I resolve to live my life without forgetting Mr. Thompson's words that come back to me repeatedly.